It was one of those quiet afternoons when the sky looked heavy and the air smelled like rain. The streets were almost empty, except for a few people rushing to get home before the storm. In a small neighborhood on the edge of the city, a 17-year-old boy named Daniel was walking home from his part-time job at the grocery store. He had been working extra hours that week, trying to save a little money to help his mom pay the bills. Daniel was the kind of kid people liked instantly. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was polite, hardworking, and always ready to lend a hand. Most days, he helped his elderly neighbor carry groceries or fixed bikes for little kids in the street. He never expected anything in return. That's just how he was raised. As he walked down the road that evening, the wind started picking up and dark clouds rolled over the sky. He pulled his jacket tighter and sped up his pace, hoping to make it home before the rain began. The smell of wet asphalt filled the air as the first drops began to fall. A few cars passed by, their headlights glowing through the drizzle. Then out of nowhere, Daniel heard a loud screech followed by a terrible crash. The sound echoed through the empty road, making his heart jump. He looked up and saw smoke rising in the distance. Without a second thought, he dropped his backpack and ran toward the noise. When he reached the curve of the road, he saw it. A black luxury car smashed against a guardrail, the front end crushed and steam pouring from under the hood. The car's tires were spinning slowly, and the sound of the engine was fading. It looked bad, really bad. Daniel didn't think. He just acted. He ran to the driver's side and peered through the window. Inside, a man in his 50s was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. The airbag had deployed, and there was blood on his forehead. Daniel shouted, trying to wake him, but there was no response. He tried opening the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic shot through him as he noticed flames flickering near the engine. He looked around and saw no one else nearby. No cars stopping, no people running to help. Just him, the rain, and the burning car. He picked up a large rock from the side of the road and smashed it against the window. The glass shattered after 2 hits. The sharp edges cut his hands, but he didn't stop. He reached inside, unlocked the door, and tried to pull the man out, but the seatbelt was stuck. The smell of smoke was getting stronger, and the heat made it hard to breathe. "Come on, please," Daniel muttered under his breath, tugging at the seatbelt. Finally, it snapped free. He wrapped his arms around the man and pulled him out with all his strength. The man was heavy, and Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. Just as he dragged him a few feet away, the car made a loud popping sound, and flames burst from the hood. Daniel fell to the ground, coughing and shaking. His hands were trembling, his knees scraped, but the man was breathing faintly. That was all that mattered. He grabbed his phone and called for help, his voice shaking as he told them what happened. The dispatcher assured him that an ambulance was on the way. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics rushed over, checking the man's pulse and lifting him onto a stretcher. One of them looked at Daniel and said, "You saved his life, kid. If you hadn't gotten him out when you did, he wouldn't have made it." Daniel just nodded, still catching his breath. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt relieved that the man was alive. When one of the police officers asked for his name, Daniel told him quietly, then stood aside as they handled the scene. The flashing lights painted the wet road red and blue, and the rain kept falling. As the ambulance drove away, Daniel started walking home, soaked to the skin and shivering. His shoes squished with every step, and his hands were still bleeding from the broken glass. He didn't care. All he wanted was to go home and tell his mom he was okay. When he finally reached his small house at the end of the street, his mother was already waiting by the door. She had seen the smoke from the direction he usually came from and had been worried. When she saw his face, her eyes widened. "Daniel, what happened? Are you hurt?" she asked, pulling him inside. He tried to smile. "I'm fine, Mom. There was a car accident on the highway. I helped the guy get out before it caught fire." Her hands flew to her mouth. "You did what?" "Oh my God, Daniel, you could have been killed." He sat down on the couch, too tired to explain everything. "I couldn't just leave him there, Mom. He was trapped." She stared at him for a long moment, torn between fear and pride. Then she hugged him tightly. "You did the right thing, baby. But please, promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," he said softly. She cleaned his cuts, made him a cup of tea, and told him to rest. The rain continued outside, tapping softly against the windows. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head. The smoke, the fire, the man's face. He wondered who he was. He looked like someone important, but in that moment it hadn't mattered. He was just a person who needed help. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of his mom calling his name. She was standing by the TV holding her phone. "Daniel, come here. You're on the news." He rushed over, still half asleep. On the screen, there was a clip of the crash site from the night before. The reporter was saying something about a young hero who had saved a man from a burning car. A blurry video taken by a bystander showed Daniel pulling the man out just before the flames spread. Daniel blinked in disbelief. "They filmed that?" His mom smiled proudly. "Everyone's talking about you. They said the man you saved is some big businessman. A millionaire, I think." Daniel frowned. "A millionaire? Seriously?" "That's what they're saying," she said. "They didn't give his name yet, but they said he owns several companies in the city." Daniel didn't know how to feel. He didn't save the man because he was rich. He would have done the same for anyone. But part of him wondered what it must feel like to have that much money, and how strange it was that their paths had crossed in such a way. By noon, people in the neighborhood started talking. Some neighbors stopped by to congratulate him. The lady from the grocery store where he worked called to say everyone there was proud of him. Even his school principal left a message, saying they wanted to honor him at an assembly. Daniel felt overwhelmed. He wasn't used to attention. He just wanted to go back to his normal routine. Later that day, while helping his mom hang laundry inside the house, he asked quietly, "Do you think that man's okay?" "I'm sure he is," she replied. "If he's as wealthy as they say, he probably has the best doctors taking care of him." Daniel nodded but stayed quiet. That night, as he sat by the window watching cars pass by, he thought about how fragile life was. One moment someone could be driving in comfort, thinking about business deals or family plans, and the next moment everything could change. He felt grateful, not for the attention or the news, but for being at the right place at the right time. Before going to bed, he said a small prayer, not for himself, but for the man he had saved. He hoped he would recover and get another chance to live his life fully. Daniel didn't know that this act of kindness would bring people into his life who would test his strength, his honesty, and his heart in ways he couldn't imagine. For now, he just wanted to rest. The rain had stopped and the world outside was quiet again. He fell asleep to the soft sound of wind rustling through the trees, unaware that his name would soon spread far beyond his small neighborhood, and that the man he saved wasn't the only one whose life had changed that night. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of knocking on the door. He rubbed his eyes, still half asleep, and heard his mom talking excitedly with someone outside. When he stepped into the small living room, he saw two people standing there, a woman with a camera and a man holding a microphone. They were from a local news station. "Are you Daniel?" the reporter asked with a friendly smile. Daniel froze for a second, unsure what to say. Yeah, that's me," the woman grinned. "We've been looking for you. You're the young man who saved Mr. Coleman's life, right?" "Mr. Coleman?" Daniel repeated. "Yes," she said. "The man from the accident, he's a well-known businessman. Owns several companies downtown. His assistant confirmed it this morning." "You're all over the news, Daniel. People are calling you a hero." Daniel looked over at his mom, who smiled proudly but seemed just as surprised. "A hero?" he murmured. The reporter asked if they could record a short interview, and after a moment of hesitation, Daniel agreed. They stepped outside near the front porch where the morning sun peeked through the clouds. He answered their questions honestly, keeping his words simple. He told them how he was just walking home, saw the crash, and did what he thought anyone would do. He didn't brag or dramatize it. When they asked how it felt to save a millionaire's life, he simply said, "I didn't know who he was. I just knew he needed help." When the interview ended, the reporter shook his hand and said, "You have a good heart, Daniel. The city could use more people like you." After they left, Daniel went back inside, still dazed. His mom hugged him tightly. "You see, baby? People see what kind of person you are. I'm proud of you." He smiled but felt a bit uneasy. All this attention made him uncomfortable. He had never liked being in the spotlight. By the afternoon, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from classmates, neighbors, even people he barely knew flooded his inbox. Some call him brave. Others wanted to know if the millionaire had contacted him yet. That evening, as Daniel helped his mom prepare dinner, She turned on the TV. Every channel seemed to be talking about the same story. Teen saves local businessman from burning car. There were clips of Daniel's interview, followed by an update from the hospital. The reporter announced that Mr. Coleman had regained consciousness and was recovering well. They said he had asked to meet the young man who saved him as soon as he was released. Daniel stopped stirring the soup for a moment. "He wants to meet me?" His mom smiled. "Looks like he does." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure how to feel. "I mean, I guess that's nice. I just hope he's okay." Over the next few days, Daniel's life changed in small but strange ways. Strangers recognized him at the grocery store. A few kids from school started calling him Hero in the hallways. Even his boss gave him a small bonus as a thank you for representing the community so well. But not everyone was kind. A few people whispered that maybe Daniel got lucky, or that he just wanted fame. Some kids joked online that he was only pretending to be humble. Daniel ignored it, but deep down it stung. He didn't want fame or rumors. He just wanted life to go back to normal. Then, about a week later, a black car pulled up outside their small house. Daniel was sitting on the porch doing his homework when it stopped in front of him. A well-dressed woman stepped out and smiled. "Hello, Daniel. I'm Ms. Lee. I work for Mr. Coleman. He asked me to thank you personally and deliver this note." She handed him a white envelope sealed neatly. Daniel opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Daniel," it read, "I don't have the right words to thank you. You saved my life when no one else was there. I'd like to meet you as soon as I'm well enough to get around. Until then, please accept this as a small token of appreciation." Inside the envelope was also a card, a prepaid gift card worth $500. Daniel's eyes widened. "I can't take this," he said quickly, trying to hand it back. Ms. Lee smiled kindly. Mr. Coleman insisted. "He said it's not payment, just a thank you. He'll explain more when you meet." Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right. Please tell him I'm glad he's doing better." She promised she would and then drove away. His mom, watching from the door, looked amazed. $500. "Daniel, do you realize what that means?" Daniel shook his head. "It means I need to find a way to thank him properly." But that night, something unexpected happened. Just as Daniel was about to go to bed, there was a loud knock at the door. His mom looked at him, worried. It was almost midnight. When Daniel opened the door, he froze. Two police officers stood outside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Daniel Reed?" one of them asked. "Yes, sir," Daniel said, confused. "I'm Officer Bryant. We need to ask you a few questions about the accident last week." Daniel blinked. "About Mr. Coleman?" "That's right," the officer said. "May we come in?" Daniel nodded slowly and stepped aside. His mom looked nervous, clutching her robe. "Is there something wrong, officer?" "Not necessarily," the other officer said. "We just need to clarify some details. It's standard procedure." They all sat down at the small kitchen table. Daniel's heart was pounding. The sound of the ticking wall clock felt louder than usual. Officer Bryant took out a notepad. "You were the first person to arrive at the crash site, correct?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "I was walking home when I heard the crash." "And you helped remove the victim from the car?" "That's right." The officer nodded slowly. "Did you notice anything else at the scene? Anyone else nearby? Anything unusual?" Daniel shook his head. "No, it was just me. The car was smoking. I broke the window and pulled him out." The officer exchanged a quick glance with his partner. "Did you happen to take anything from the car?" Daniel frowned. "Take anything?" "No, I didn't take anything." Officer Bryant's tone grew more serious. "You're sure?" "Because the victim's personal belongings, including an expensive watch and a briefcase, while you're missing." Daniel's chest tightened. "I didn't take anything, I swear. I called for help right after getting him out." His mom stood up, her voice shaking. "My son would never steal. He risked his life to help that man." The officers tried to calm her down, saying it was just an investigation. "We're not accusing him of anything yet," one of them said softly. "We just have to follow every lead." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The very people who should have been thanking him were now questioning his honesty. After more questions, they finally stood up to leave. "Thank you for your time," Officer Bryant said. "We'll be in touch." As they walked out into the night, Daniel stood frozen by the door. His mom turned to him, eyes full of worry. "Why would they think that, Daniel?" I don't know, he whispered. Maybe someone else was there. Maybe they think I ran off with something. She shook her head firmly. You did nothing wrong. The truth will come out. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made him tense. He replayed the night of the crash over and over, trying to remember if anyone else had been nearby. But all he could remember was the smoke, the flames, and the man he saved. The next morning, people in the neighborhood already knew about the police visit. Gossip spread quickly. Some people avoided him. Others looked at him with pity. It hurt more than he expected. At school, a few kids whispered behind his back. One of them said, "Guess our hero wasn't so honest after all." Daniel pretended not to hear, but his chest ached. When he got home that afternoon, he sat on the porch quietly, staring at the road where everything had started. He couldn't understand how something good had turned into something so painful. Later that evening, his mom came outside and sat beside him. "Don't lose heart, Daniel," she said softly. "The truth always finds a way out." He nodded, though doubt still clouded his mind. "I just don't want people thinking I'm a thief, Mom. I didn't do anything wrong." "I know you didn't," she said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "And soon everyone else will know too." As the sun went down, Daniel made himself a silent promise. He wouldn't let this destroy him. He had done what was right, and somehow, that had to count for something. But what Daniel didn't know was that miles away in a quiet hospital room, Mr. Coleman had just woken up fully for the first time, and he was about to remember everything that really happened that night. The morning after the police visit, Daniel woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashing lights, police uniforms, and the look of doubt on the officer's face. His mom had already left for work, leaving a note on the table that said, "Keep your head up, son. I believe in you." He read it 3 times before folding it into his pocket. It gave him a little strength, but deep down he was still shaken. The thought that people might see him as a thief made his stomach twist. When he walked to school, it felt like everyone's eyes were on him. Some students smiled and waved, pretending everything was normal, but he could hear whispers behind him. "That's the guy from the news," someone muttered. Didn't the police go to his house? Daniel tried to ignore it, but it followed him all day. The stares, the murmurs, the half-finished questions. By lunchtime, he couldn't take it anymore. He ate alone outside under a tree where it was quiet. He thought about Mr. Coleman, the man whose life he'd saved. Surely once Mr. Coleman was better, he would tell the truth. He would clear Daniel's name. That was the only thing keeping him calm. After school, Daniel walked home in silence. The sun was setting and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. He passed by the spot where the accident had happened. The burned marks were still visible on the road. The guardrail was bent and pieces of glass still glimmered faintly in the grass. He stood there for a long time, just staring. The memory of that night replayed again. The sound of the crash, the heat, the man's weight in his arms. He remembered looking around before breaking the window. He thought he was alone, but now that he really tried to recall every detail, he wasn't sure anymore. Was there a shadow near the trees? A second figure running away? The more he thought about it, the more it felt real. Maybe someone else had been there. Maybe that person took the missing things. Daniel rushed home and told his mom what he remembered. "I think someone else was there that night," he said quickly. "I didn't see their face, but I swear I wasn't alone." His mom looked thoughtful. "Then you should tell the police," she said softly. Maybe they missed that, but Daniel hesitated. The way the officers had looked at him made him feel small, like they had already decided he was guilty. He didn't want to face that again. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "Mr. Coleman's going to remember. He'll tell them the truth." And somewhere in the city, that was exactly what was happening. In a private hospital room, Mr. Coleman was sitting up for the first time in days. His assistant, Ms. Lee, was by his side, reading messages from business partners and reporters. But his mind wasn't on any of that. He kept thinking about the boy who had saved him. He remembered flashes, the sound of breaking glass, strong arms pulling him out, and a voice saying, "You're going to be okay? Just hang on." It was all blurry, but he remembered the feeling of being saved. Then something else came back to him. Another figure. A man opening the passenger door, grabbing something and running before the fire spread. Mr. Coleman frowned. "Wait," he said slowly. There was someone else. Ms. Lee looked up. "Someone else?" Yes, he said firmly, a man. He was there before the boy called for help. He took something. My briefcase, I think. Ms. Lee's eyes widened. Sir, the police said your briefcase and watch were missing. They've been questioning the boy. What? Mr. Coleman said sharply. Questioning him? Why? They think he might have taken them, she said hesitantly. Mr. Coleman looked furious. That's ridiculous. That boy saved my life. He didn't steal from me. He pressed the call button for the nurse and asked for the detective handling his case. Within an hour, 2 officers arrived at the hospital. When they walked in, he wasted no time. I want you to stop harassing that kid, he said. You're accusing the wrong person. I remember what happened that night. The detectives exchanged surprised glances. Can you tell us what you remember, sir? Mr. Coleman nodded. There was someone else there before the boy arrived. It was my driver. He was supposed to take me home that evening. I think he ran when the car crashed. He must have taken the briefcase and my watch before fleeing. The officers scribbled notes quickly. Do you remember his name? One asked. Yes, his name's Ray. He's been with my company for almost a year. The detective leaned forward. That's helpful information, sir. We'll look into it immediately. After they left, Mr. Coleman leaned back in bed, still shaken. The idea that his own employee had robbed him after the crash made him sick. But at least now he knew Daniel was innocent. He couldn't wait to make things right. The next morning, detectives located the driver's address. When they arrived, they found the briefcase hidden under the floorboards in his apartment. Inside were business documents and a luxury watch. The man tried to deny everything at first, but when shown the evidence, he confessed. He admitted that after the crash, he panicked. He thought Mr. Coleman was dead, so he took the briefcase and ran. He never expected anyone else to show up, especially not a teenage boy who would become a hero. The news spread quickly. By evening, the police department publicly announced that Daniel had been cleared of any suspicion. The real culprit had been caught. That night, Daniel and his mom were eating dinner when someone knocked on the door again. For a moment, Daniel froze, remembering the last time police had come. But this time, when he opened the door, he saw Mr. Coleman himself standing there, wearing a kind smile. He looked much healthier, though still pale. Beside him was Ms. Lee holding a small box. Daniel, Mr. Coleman said warmly, I finally get to thank you in person. Daniel's mouth fell open slightly. Mr. Coleman, I'm glad you're okay. Mr. Coleman stepped forward and took his hand. I'm alive because of you, and I heard the police made a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Daniel shook his head quickly. It's all right, sir. I'm just happy you're okay. But Mr. Coleman could see the tiredness in his eyes. He knew the boy had been through a lot. I can't undo what happened, he said, but I can make sure you know how grateful I am. He handed Daniel the small box. Inside was a simple gold watch. This isn't about money or gifts, Mr. Coleman said softly. It's a reminder that time is precious, and you gave me more of it. Daniel didn't know what to say. He looked down at the watch, then back at the man. Thank you, he said quietly. But I didn't do it for anything. I just couldn't walk away. I know, Mr. Coleman said, smiling. That's why you deserve every bit of good that comes your way. His mom came to the door, wiping her hands on a towel. When she realized who it was, her eyes widened. Mr. Coleman greeted her respectfully and thanked her for raising such a brave son. They invited him inside for tea. The small living room felt warmer than usual, filled with laughter and stories. Mr. Coleman told them about the night of the accident and how he'd just left a business meeting before the crash. He admitted that his driver had taken advantage of the chaos. Daniel listened quietly, still trying to take it all in. It felt strange to have this wealthy man sitting in their humble home, sipping tea from mismatched cups, treating them like equals. Before leaving, Mr. Coleman said, Daniel, when you graduate, let me know. I'd like to help you with your future, whether it's college, training, or anything else you want to do. You deserve that chance. Daniel was speechless. I don't know what to say. Just promise me you'll keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Coleman said. You've got a good heart. Don't ever let the world make you doubt that. When they left, Daniel watched the car drive away until the tail lights disappeared. His mom put a hand on his shoulder and said softly, See, the truth always finds its way out. That night, for the first time in days, Daniel slept peacefully. The heaviness in his chest was gone. He felt lighter, not because of the attention or the praise, but because everything was finally right again. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with good news. The same people who had doubted him now congratulated him. Even his classmates apologized for believing rumors. When he walked into school, the principal called him into the auditorium. There, in front of hundreds of students, Daniel was given a Community Bravery Award. Cameras flashed and people cheered, but Daniel just smiled humbly. He didn't need awards or headlines. He just needed to know he had done the right thing, and now the world knew it too. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Daniel walked back to the place where it all began. The road was quiet again, with no smoke or flashing lights this time. He stood there for a while, hands in his pockets, watching the wind move through the grass. In that moment, he realized something important, that doing the right thing wasn't always easy. Sometimes it meant being misunderstood, doubted, or even accused. But in the end, the truth always came to light. He looked up at the sky, smiled softly, and whispered, "It was worth it." Then he turned around and walked home, ready for whatever came next. The days after the police visit felt long and heavy for Daniel and his mother. The air in their small house had changed. It used to be filled with laughter, but now even the sound of the kettle boiling felt too loud. Every time someone knocked on the door, Daniel's heart jumped. He couldn't stop thinking about the faces of those officers, their doubtful eyes, and the quiet way they said, "We'll be in touch." He hadn't done anything wrong. He knew that, but still it felt like everyone was looking at him differently. The story of the police questioning spread through the neighborhood faster than he could imagine. A few neighbors tried to comfort his mother, saying it must be a misunderstanding, but others whispered in low voices when Daniel walked by. At school, things weren't any better. Some of his friends still sat with him at lunch, telling him not to worry, but others kept their distance. He could hear the quiet talk behind his back. "They say he took something from that man's car." "You think it's true?" "I don't know. He doesn't look like the stealing type, but who knows?" Daniel tried to ignore it, but it hurt. Every rumor felt like a small stone thrown at him, slowly piling up inside his chest. At home, his mother did her best to stay strong. She told him again and again that the truth would come out. But late at night, Daniel could hear her crying quietly in her room. She was worried about him, and he knew it. That made him feel even worse. He had only wanted to help someone in danger. Now it felt like the whole world thought he was a thief. One evening, as Daniel sat outside on the small porch watching the sunset fade behind the rooftops, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It said, "Mr. Coleman wants to speak with you. Please call this number when you can." Daniel stared at the message for a long time, unsure if it was real. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe it was the police again. But something inside him told him to try. He called the number, and a soft voice answered, "Mr. Coleman's assistant." She explained that Mr. Coleman had heard about the police questioning and was very upset about it. She said he wanted to see Daniel as soon as possible. Daniel hesitated. "Does he think I did it?" he asked quietly. The woman paused for a second before replying, "No, he doesn't. He just wants to talk." The next morning, Daniel woke early. He put on his cleanest shirt, combed his hair carefully, and took the bus downtown with his mother. They didn't have a car, and his mom insisted on going with him. Neither of them spoke much during the ride. The city buildings passed by, tall and shining like a different world. They arrived at a large office building with glass walls and a doorman at the front. The security guard checked their names and led them to an elevator. Daniel felt small inside that fancy place, his hands sweaty, his heart racing. When the elevator doors opened, they were met by Mr. Coleman's assistant, the same woman Daniel had spoken to on the phone. She smiled kindly and led them into a quiet room. A few minutes later, Mr. Coleman entered. He looked different from the last time Daniel saw him. Not weak and bandaged like at the crash, but still pale and moving carefully as if his body hadn't fully healed yet. When he saw Daniel, his face softened. "Daniel," he said, walking closer, "I've been waiting to see you." Daniel stood up awkwardly. "Sir, I'm really sorry about everything." "I didn't." Mr. Coleman raised a hand gently. "I know," he said. "You don't need to apologize. You saved my life." His voice carried a kind of warmth Daniel hadn't expected. Mr. Coleman invited them to sit and offered water. Then he looked straight at Daniel. The police told me they were questioning you. They think you might have taken something from my car that night. Is that true? Daniel shook his head quickly. No, sir. I swear I didn't touch anything except the door and the seatbelt. I just wanted to get you out before the car caught fire. Mr. Coleman nodded slowly, watching the boy's eyes. I believe you, he said after a moment. But I also need to find out what really happened. I lost an important briefcase that night. It had private documents inside. Things that could hurt my business if they got into the wrong hands. Daniel's heart sank. He could feel his mother's hand gently squeeze his arm under the table. Mr. Coleman continued. The police told me they couldn't find the briefcase in the car. They think someone took it right after the crash. But I remember seeing only you there. I wasn't the only one, Daniel said quickly. There was someone else. I thought it was maybe your driver. I saw a man running away from the car before I reached you, but I didn't see his face clearly because of the rain. Mr. Coleman's eyes widened slightly. My driver? He repeated. That's interesting. He leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He told the police he ran to call for help, but something about his story didn't feel right. He stood up and walked toward the window. You know, he said quietly, sometimes people you trust the most can surprise you in the worst ways. He turned back to Daniel with a new sense of urgency. Daniel, thank you for telling me that. It helps more than you think. I'm going to look into it myself. He promised to stay in touch and told Daniel and his mother not to worry, that he would make sure the truth came out. That night, Daniel went home feeling a small flicker of hope. For the first time in days, he felt like someone believed him. He didn't know what Mr. Coleman would find, but at least he wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few days, Mr. Coleman worked quietly behind the scenes. He reviewed every report, talked to his staff, and even visited the car storage lot where his wrecked vehicle was kept. The investigators had said the dashcam was too damaged to retrieve anything, but Mr. Coleman didn't believe that. He hired a private technician to check it again. 3 days later, the technician called him in. You won't believe this, he said, showing Mr. Coleman the recovered footage. It was grainy and dark, but enough to see the truth. The video clearly showed the crash, the car sliding, the airbag deploying. Mr. Coleman slumped over the steering wheel. A few seconds later, the door opened on the passenger side. His driver stepped out, looking panicked, glanced around, grabbed the briefcase, and ran off into the night. Moments later, Daniel appeared on camera, running from the opposite direction. He smashed the window, unbuckled Mr. Coleman, and dragged him away just before the fire started. Mr. Coleman sat in silence watching it, his hands trembling slightly. It was all there, the truth, the proof. That afternoon, he called the police himself. He demanded they clear Daniel's name and start looking for the real thief. The officers were stunned. Within hours, they tracked down the driver, who had already quit his job and was hiding in another city. When they caught him, he still had part of the missing documents. News of the arrest spread quickly, but this time it carried a different tone. The same people who had whispered behind Daniel's back were now telling everyone how wrong they had been. His teachers congratulated him at school. The neighbors came by the house to apologize. One evening, a black car stopped outside Daniel's house. When he opened the door, Mr. Coleman was standing there smiling gently. Mind if I come in? He asked. Daniel's mother welcomed him warmly, still amazed that such a wealthy man would come to their humble home. Mr. Coleman sat on the couch and looked around the small living room. It's good to see where you come from, he said quietly. You remind me of myself when I was your age. Honest, hardworking, and trying to make the best out of little. He turned to Daniel. I owe you more than just thanks. You saved my life, and you also reminded me that decency still exists in this world. I'm sorry for what you went through. You didn't deserve that. Daniel tried to smile. It's okay, sir. I'm just glad everything's clear now. But Mr. Coleman shook his head. No, it's not just okay. It's life-changing. You showed courage that night. You did the right thing when no one else would have stopped. He handed Daniel a small envelope. Inside was a letter and a scholarship certificate for a university of Daniel's choice. You said you wanted to study engineering, right? Well, now you can. Daniel's mother's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't speak. Mr. Coleman continued. This isn't charity. It's a thank you. I've also spoken to your school. They'll help guide you through the next steps. You've earned it, Daniel. The boy didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. He just nodded, whispering, "Thank you, sir." Mr. Coleman smiled warmly. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "No matter what happens, don't lose that heart of yours. The world needs more people like you." As the older man left, Daniel stood by the door for a long time, watching the car disappear into the night. The streetlights reflected on the wet road, just like the night of the accident. But this time he felt something new. Peace. For the first time in weeks, Daniel slept without fear. The truth had finally set him free, and deep down he knew his story wasn't ending here. It was only just beginning. Days had passed since Mr. Coleman's visit, but Daniel still woke up every morning feeling as if he were living in a dream. Everything around him looked the same. The peeling paint on the kitchen wall, the sound of his mom humming softly while making breakfast, the rusted mailbox outside their small house. Yet something inside him had changed completely. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt seen. Not as a poor kid from a forgotten neighborhood, not as the boy who was once accused of something he didn't do, but as someone who had made a real difference. The morning after Mr. Coleman gave him the scholarship letter, Daniel sat at the kitchen table reading it over and over. He could hardly believe the words on the paper. A full scholarship covering tuition, housing, and even books, all paid for by Mr. Coleman's foundation. His mother sat across from him, smiling through tears. "See, baby," she said softly. "I told you the truth would come out. You just had to keep your heart clean." Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. His mom had been his biggest support through all of it. The fear, the doubt, the whispers. She had never once stopped believing in him. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal, though in a much better way. People in the neighborhood started greeting him again, no longer with suspicion, but with pride. The local newspaper printed a story about how Daniel's honesty and courage inspired the community. Even the police chief personally came to their house to apologize for how things were handled. Daniel didn't hold any grudges. He just smiled and said, "I understand, sir. You were doing your job." That simple response made people admire him even more. At school, things changed too. Teachers who once looked at him with concern now used his story as an example of integrity and bravery. His classmates stopped whispering and started asking questions, not the cruel kind, but ones filled with curiosity. "How did it feel? Weren't you scared? Would you do it again?" Daniel always answered honestly. "Yeah, I was scared," he'd say. "But sometimes being scared doesn't mean you stop helping. It just means you care enough to do something anyway." A few days later, the principal called an assembly in the gym. Everyone gathered, buzzing with excitement. And when Daniel's name was called to the stage, the applause shook the room. The principal handed him a certificate of bravery from the city mayor's office. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and for a brief moment, Daniel's eyes searched the crowd until he found his mom smiling proudly in the front row. But even with all the praise, Daniel remained humble. When reporters asked him for interviews, he agreed only to one. He wanted to tell the story not to gain attention, but to remind people that kindness still mattered. During the interview, the reporter asked, "Daniel, after everything you've been through, saving someone's life, being accused, then cleared, what have you learned from it all?" Daniel paused, thinking for a moment before answering. "I learned that doing good isn't always easy," he said. "Sometimes people will doubt you. Sometimes they'll even hurt you for it. But you can't stop doing what's right, just because the world doesn't notice right away. Good things have a way of finding their way back to you." The reporter smiled. "That's a powerful message," she said. The story spread online, and soon Daniel's words were being shared across social media. People called him the hero with a kind heart, but Daniel didn't let it get to his head. He still helped his mom with chores, still worked part-time at the grocery store until school ended, and still took the same bus every morning. One afternoon, Mr. Coleman invited him and his mother to his office again. This time it wasn't just for a thank you. He had something special planned. When they arrived, Mr. Coleman greeted them warmly. "Daniel," he said with a big smile, "I wanted you to see this." He led them into a large conference room where a few reporters were waiting. On the table was a stack of documents, and on the screen behind him was a logo that read, "The Future Path Foundation." "This," Mr. Coleman explained, "is something we're starting because of you. It's a scholarship and mentorship program for underprivileged youth who want to go to college but don't have the means. And I want you to be the first student we help, and someday the first mentor who helps others." Daniel's jaw dropped. "Me?" he asked, almost whispering. Mr. Coleman nodded. "You inspired this, Daniel. You showed that sometimes greatness doesn't come from money or power. It comes from the heart. You've earned more than just a scholarship. You've earned a future." Daniel's mother wiped her eyes, holding her son's hand tightly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't know what this means for us." Mr. Coleman smiled. "I think I do," he said gently. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Daniel's life. He finished high school with top grades and was accepted into a university near the city. On the day he moved into his dorm, his mom hugged him tightly, her eyes glistening with pride. "Go make me proud," she said. "I will, Mom," Daniel whispered. University life was a whole new world for him. The campus was large and lively, filled with people from everywhere. At first, Daniel felt out of place, surrounded by students who drove expensive cars and wore designer clothes. But he quickly realized that what set him apart wasn't what he didn't have, but what he carried inside. He studied hard, joined student groups, and even volunteered at local shelters on weekends. The kindness he showed during the car accident became part of who he was. People respected him not because of his story, but because of the person he had become. Meanwhile, Mr. Coleman kept his promise. The Future Path Foundation grew rapidly. Each year, it helped dozens of students like Daniel get into college, providing not only financial help but also guidance and emotional support. Every summer, Daniel returned home to work with the foundation, speaking to younger kids who dreamed of a better life. He told them, "You don't have to be rich to make a difference. You just have to care enough to act when the moment comes." One day, a few years later, Daniel got a call from Mr. Coleman asking him to visit his office again. When Daniel arrived, Mr. Coleman looked older but still had the same warmth in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Mr. Coleman said. "You've grown into a fine young man, and I believe you're ready for something bigger." He handed Daniel a folder. Inside were documents naming him as the youth director for the foundation, responsible for creating new programs for students across the country. Daniel was stunned. "Sir, I don't know what to say." Mr. Coleman smiled. "Say yes. You've earned it. You're the reason this foundation exists. I want you to lead it forward." Daniel nodded, feeling a wave of emotion. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. "I know you will," Mr. Coleman replied. Over the next few years, Daniel worked tirelessly. He traveled to schools, met struggling families, and shared his story, not to show off, but to show others that hope was real. Everywhere he went, people listened. His story wasn't about luck or heroism. It was about compassion, about doing what's right even when no one's watching. One evening, long after a busy day of meetings, Daniel found himself driving home along the same road where it had all started, the road where he had saved Mr. Coleman that rainy night. He slowed down, staring at the place where the guardrail still had a faint dent from the crash. He parked his car and stepped out. The sky was painted with shades of orange and gold, the wind calm and soft. Standing there, he felt a wave of memories rush over him. The sound of the rain, the smell of burning rubber, the fear, the confusion, and the decision he made in that split second to help a stranger. That one moment had changed everything. He looked up at the sky and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself. As he got back into his car and drove away, the setting sun reflected on his windshield, just like that night years ago. But this time it wasn't the start of trouble. It was the reflection of a future he had built with courage, honesty, and kindness. When he got home, his mother was sitting on the porch just like she always did. She stood up when she saw him, smiling proudly. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" she said. Daniel hugged her tightly. "Yeah," he whispered. "But I couldn't have done it without you," she smiled. "Maybe, but you're the one who chose to stop that night. You're the one who made it happen." Daniel looked out at the darkening sky. "I guess sometimes one small choice can change everything," he said. His mom nodded. "That's life, baby. That's how the world works." And as the stars began to appear one by one above them, Daniel realized something deep in his heart, that true heroism wasn't about saving a life once. It was about using that one moment to make the rest of your life meaningful. He had saved a man that night, but in a way that moment had saved him too.